So, our next speaker is Mary Kästrup, the program manager of City of Copenhagen's bicycle program, and who takes us on the ride and describes what is a recipe for success with building cycling infrastructure. Please, Mary, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you so much for inviting me and my colleagues from the City of Copenhagen. It's a true pleasure to be here in Helsinki. I've been following the Handshake project for several years now, and I'm very excited about being able to share these perspectives from Copenhagen, but also to be inspired by Helsinki and Amsterdam. I'm Mary Kästrup. I'm heading the bicycle program with the City of Copenhagen, where I've worked since 2008. I have a background in cultural studies, and I will be sharing an introduction to Copenhagen's bicycle planiverse. Then I will also try to describe how Copenhagen works with quality and infrastructure through a holistic approach, through a focus on the end user, and by using data. And then I will round off with some perspectives about what's next for Helsinki. So in Copenhagen, we love our plans. We have lots of plans, and from the last couple of days, I've also heard that Helsinki likewise is all about planning as well. We have our overall municipal plan, and as I understand it, Helsinki in the coming period will also develop the next city plan. But underneath that, we have a vision for the technical environmental administration, and then we have the sector plans for cycling, mobility, climate, waste, urban life, traffic safety, etc. I think it's really important to not just focus on cycling as an isolated measure, but to really think cross-sectorial. So in Copenhagen, cycling is also part of our climate plan, our mobility plan, and the overall municipal plan. And it seems like you have the same approach here in Helsinki to try to also think across the sectors. But of course, we also work with a dedicated cycle planiverse in order to make sure that we have a well thought of approach to cycling and also a transparent basis for working with cycling. So we have a bicycle strategy, which sort of describes why we want to promote cycling, what should be the end result. It should be a better city with better life quality. And here we define the quantitative political targets for our cycling measures. Then we have two priority plans describing what we should do and where in the city. We have a specific priority plan for bicycle infrastructure, describing the construction of bicycle lanes, bicycle tracks, intersection improvements, regional cycle superhighways, and the green cycle routes. We also have a priority plan for bicycle parking. Then we also have plans or guidelines that describe then how we should implement these plans. So we have a set of guidelines called Focus on Cycling, describing the design of bicycle infrastructure. And we are working also now on some guidelines about bicycle parking. How should the administration deal with bicycle parking, not only in construction projects, but also all the internal procedures? And finally, we have a long tradition of monitoring and communicating our data. So we have a bicycle account dating back to 1996. I've been reading Helsinki's bicycle accounts for several years now, and I'm very impressed about those. So it's really nice to see that format can work in many other cities as well. The last 5 years, we've also done an annual report to our local council, more in terms of the implementation of the political decisions. So we also have a lot of nerdy planning in the specific bicycle sector. Our bicycle strategy claims the political vision that we should be the world's best city for cyclists. So that is the bar, and we welcome all other cities who want to join that club of having high ambitions, because I think together we can help raise the bar. So much for the competition. I think a little bit of friendly competition can make everyone better. And the vision is to make it quick, safe, and comfortable to get from A to B anywhere in the city on a bike. And we should do that, of course, by improving our infrastructure, but also by innovation and cooperation. And the picture here is from one of our iconic projects in a high street called Nørrebrogade. I'm sure many of you have already heard about this case, but basically before in this street, we had 4 car lanes and some more narrow bicycle tracks. So what we did was we took out 2 out of 4 car lanes. We made the bicycle tracks 3 meters wide in each side of the street, so it's unidirectional. We also made modal filters, so it's not possible for a car to go all the way through the street. You can reach most of the street, but you cannot cross it in a car. And as Klaus, our former mayor, knows, it raised a lot of debate, a lot of criticism. This was in the time of the financial crisis. So some of the shop owners, they claimed that they had to close due to this traffic experiment, and shops did close. They also closed in many of the other high streets, but of course it felt very critical. And we started out with a trial where we just made little temporary ramps to widen the bicycle tracks. And then we did a survey, and the locals were really satisfied. And afterwards, when we had made it permanent, we counted the total number of users in the street, and we found that 20% more people are using the street now than before. So yeah, sure, we have less car drivers. That was part of the project, but the total amount of mobility has been increased. Another nice side effect is that you can actually hang out here and have a conversation, which was not possible before because of the noise from the cars. So we also fundamentally changed the function of this urban space. And a last detail from this case is the white arrows you see. It's an example of innovation. It's an experiment with overtaking lanes, because it's a vision in our cycle strategy that on the main network in Copenhagen, we should have 3 meters wide bicycle tracks in each side of the street, so that 2 persons, maybe slow cyclists, maybe a parent and a child, can ride side by side, and a fast cyclist can overtake. It could also be someone with a cargo bicycle and another person overtaking, or 2 fast cyclists being overtaken by another fast cyclist. So if we want to accommodate for all kinds of citizens to use our infrastructure, we should also provide the necessary space for that. So that's the vision. Right now, it's only 20% of our primary network who has so wide bicycle tracks, and the goal is 80%. So we can also recognize the feeling of having really high ambitions, and it does take hard work and hard priorities to realize those goals. We also have ambitious goals regarding the modal share. This is the numbers for 2020. The goal is that the car should maximum have a modal share of 25% in 2025. And as you can see, we are not there yet. Of course, COVID has made the numbers go a little bit crazy in 2020, but even before then, as you can see, the downward trend of car traffic is still relatively slow. And walking, cycling, and public transportation should be minimum 25%. And this is the modal share of all trips in Copenhagen, not only residential trips or commuter trips. So all the mobility you see out there in the street. I looked into some of the numbers from Helsinki, where you document the residential modal share. And I found it interesting that you have a lower car share than Copenhagen when it comes to residential trips. You have a higher public transportation and walking share, and of course we have a higher cycling share. But I mean, kudos to Helsinki to having a lower car modal share for residential trips in Copenhagen. I think we can definitely inspire each other in a two-way relation here. As I said earlier, we've been doing an annual reporting to our local council on cycling the last 5 years, but this year we stopped doing that and we made an annual mobility report. And what we are seeing in Copenhagen after maybe 15 years of really ambitious cycling measures is that we see the beginning of a shift in paradigm, where cycling is not this standalone project, but it's part of an overall shift in mentality about mobility, primarily caused by our ambition to be CO2 neutral in 2025, which is just around the corner. And as you see, car traffic hasn't really declined that much over time. So if we want to reach that goal, we have to look into how we not only promote green modes of transportation, but also actively seek to reduce CO2 emitting traffic, such as car traffic. So our local council has been discussing the last year what could be ways to do that in a sensible way. And we haven't made any decisions yet, but I think it's an interesting shift, not only to talk about cycling as an isolated thing, but also to look at it really in combination with other measures directly targeting car traffic. And this is relevant not only for the climate agenda, but of course also for urban development, congestion, health, traffic safety, economical growth, etc. So, back to infrastructure quality. How do we work with that in Copenhagen? I would sum it up by saying that we pride ourselves by having a holistic approach, a user focus, and we work with data. And from the last days here in Helsinki, from what I've heard so far, I can recognize many of these aspects in the work of Helsinki. So it's not that we will say we have a monopoly on this, but I will try to share some examples of how we work with this. So one way to work holistically with planning is to make sure you have cohesiveness in your bicycle infrastructure. And so this is the main network, our Plus network. The blue lines is where we need more capacity. The orange lines is where we need completely new infrastructure. The pink lines is where the existing infrastructure is okay. So we don't have to start completely from scratch, but we need to fill in the missing links. I think this is a similar situation here in Helsinki. Maybe you have further way to go than Copenhagen, but it's really about making sure that you can get from A to B across the whole city on a reasonable quality infrastructure. And then we have the black symbols. These are places where we need tunnels and bridges. And the picture here is from the Inner Harbour Bridge, which was built in 2016. It's a car-free bridge, and that has really connected Copenhagen in a whole new way because it links the historical city center, you can see with all the old ships where all the Japanese tourists are, with a neighborhood in the city where no one went before, and now it's buzzing with life because all of a sudden you have this connection across the city. So for me, to see this cohesiveness is really an important aspect of making it possible not only to go by bike on this prioritized stretch where a politician was happy to fund a nice infrastructure project, but across the whole city. Working holistically is also to having both the short-term perspective, but also have the perseverance that we discussed yesterday. And even in Copenhagen, good bicycle infrastructure does not just magically pop up overnight. So this is an example of a street in the city center, where for many years we only had a painted bicycle lane. And then in 2015, we upgraded that to a unidirectional curb-separated bicycle track. That's the normal Copenhagen standard, and we also widened the capacity. And sometimes now when you cycle around the city, it's difficult to imagine how it was before we put in this high-quality infrastructure, because as soon as it's there, people use it and they take it for granted. But it has been a long process, step by step, filling in the missing gaps. And especially back in the 60s and the 70s, when there was less political support in Copenhagen, we actually made a lot of these painted lanes, which is not optimal and it doesn't feel very safe, but at least it reserved the space out in the cityscape so that we could later upgrade it. A holistic approach is also not only constructing infrastructure, but make sure that it's accessible for the citizens. And I noticed in your bicycle action plan, maintenance and winter maintenance is one of 5 key elements. And in Copenhagen, we also put a lot of effort into prioritizing winter maintenance. So we have 120 kilometers of highly prioritized winter maintenance routes where we salt and we remove snow. And then the total expansion of our winter maintenance for cyclists is 600 kilometers. We also have a political target that 70% of Copenhageners should be satisfied with our maintenance in general. And right now that number is, I think, 67% or something like that. But if you want good quality in your infrastructure, you should be able to access it all year around. But you should also think about combining the hardware with the digital software. So we have an ITS program where we have a dedicated plan designating which corridors bicycle traffic should have priority in rush hour in terms of having green waves in our traffic signal lights. So that's another example of how you can not only implement good quality bicycle infrastructure in the construction team or in the planning team. You need to think across the whole administration, the whole organization, and think of all these aspects that together make up the good cycling experience. Yesterday, we also discussed the aesthetic aspect of cycling infrastructure, and Klaus mentioned this cycle Serpent. I think it's a really good example of thinking holistically, because originally we had just planned a basic ramp following the wall of the shopping center here, and then the architects suggested we should do something more visionary. And for me, the holistical aspect of this is that it's a really nice sensory experience when you ride this cycle Serpent. I do it 2 times a day going to and back from work. But also for the pedestrians surrounding this space, for everyone looking at it from the outside, it also brings something back to the city. So this is really, really high quality for the cyclists, but also for the city. It's a generous bicycle infrastructure in that way. And before, cyclists had to share this sidewalk down on the ground level with the pedestrians. And now it's also a much more pleasant experience for the pedestrians. So for me, that's also an example of a holistical solution. And then, so that was an example of a macro project, but then Klaus also referred to this yesterday. The devil is also in the detail, and I think that was Peter's point. Also on a micro level, you can really have good quality, and the footrests are another example of this. Of course, the basic infrastructure should be in place, but then you can top on with small interventions like this. And then this brings me to the next point about having the user perspective. Because what we do when we put up footrests is that we recognize the feeling, the perspective of the user. The bother when you have to step down from the saddle, and the ease where you can stay on the saddle even though you're waiting for the red light. And so the user perspective for me is really important when we sit at our desks with all our planning documents, to all the time have this sensation of what it's actually like out in the real world. And this is especially important if you want to reach a wider audience, not only the person cycling today, no matter the conditions, but if you want to reach many different user groups. So looking into the user perspective is also respecting that users are different. One example is from our survey around cycling among school children in Copenhagen. And so you can see, we asked parents, do you feel safe regarding the school route for your child when they have to cycle to school? 40% said, no, I don't feel safe for my child. 46% said that they felt safe. And then we asked the children, and 82% felt safe. This could be just, kids don't know about traffic safety, so they are just naive, or it could be that parents are over-concerned and hysterical. I'm not the one to judge, but I think at least these two different perspectives are important to take into consideration when we plan for cycling. And then users are not only different, but they are also interdependent. So, of course, we should have bicycle infrastructure that caters for the daily commuter who bikes by him or herself and is in a rush. But we also need to provide good infrastructure for the parent who wants to go cycling with their child on a Sunday afternoon. So our basic infrastructure is one way, each side of the street physically separated. But we also have an additional network of green cycle routes, where it can sometimes be bidirectional, like this one, the Harbour Circle. And then this is an example of how we combine the user perspective with our use of data. When we made our bicycle priority plan, we had a student intern, and sometimes this is where the good ideas come from, and he said, shouldn't we engage the citizens in this plan? And I said, oh no, it's too time-consuming, and we're really busy, and blah, blah, blah. And then he talked to our geodata division, and they were like, oh yeah, we can make this interactive map. It's not that difficult, Marie. And so we tried it out. And then we asked the citizens of Copenhagen to help us map where they felt we had a need for new bicycle tracks, where the existing bicycle tracks were too narrow, and which intersections were problematic. And we only communicated this through social media and local newspapers. We didn't have a big budget. And we got almost 10,000 dots here in the map. And it's been extremely helpful in our planning. And it's quite amazing how to see certain corridors just really stand out. And what I like about this mapping is that it communicates so directly. You don't need an 80-page report to explain this. Our decision makers can see the map and they can see with their own eyes, even though Copenhagen has a good reputation and we feel we are almost there. There is still work to be done, and this is the citizens speaking, not the planners. But we can also use it in our day-to-day planning. And right now we have actually done the same exercise for school children. We have asked all parents in Copenhagen and the elder school children where in the city they don't feel safe cycling and walking. We also have loads of quantitative data. We have this tradition going back to Jan Gehl that Klaus mentioned this yesterday. If you don't measure it, it doesn't count. So we want to make cycling visible. We want it to be taken seriously. So of course we also have to quantify it. So we have data on the number of cyclists, the number of trips, the volume of the bicycle traffic, travel time, cycling speeds, number of stops in corridors. We have data on accidents, how many cyclists break the rules in intersection, where is our bicycle infrastructure, where is our bicycle parking, what is the capacity of our bicycle parking, where are all our construction and renovation projects, and how much money do we invest and how much money do we spend. But it's really important also to consider the qualitative data, again coming back to the user perspective. And many of our quantitative political targets are related to, I think, what you in your bicycle plan, action plan are calling, I can't remember the name, the Effectivity Indicators. So you can, of course, have targets about how many kilometers of bicycle infrastructure you should construct or how many bicycle parking spaces you should put up. But the end result should be user satisfaction, because not only is the overall goal to make more people cycle, but we want to improve their lives. So if we make a lot of bicycle infrastructure that doesn't make sense for the end user, then we have not fulfilled the overall political vision. So for instance, in Copenhagen, we have quantitative goals for satisfaction with maintenance, satisfaction with the overall bicycle culture in Copenhagen. Does that have a positive effect on the overall urban life and atmosphere? The perceived safety as a supplement to the actual number of accidents, etc. And I have seen similar things here in Helsinki, and I think that's a very valuable approach. So to round off some perspectives for Helsinki, from what I've heard and read so far, there is really also a holistic view on cycling here in Helsinki. The Bicycle Action Plan is a good example. It describes infrastructure, but it also describes maintenance, communication, and other aspects. The whole idea of inviting a private company to speak here to talk about tax incentives is also a way to look holistically at cycling. The user focus, I also experienced that, as I said, you have specific targets for increased satisfaction. I will say there is still potential to upgrade the infrastructure solutions, but I'm sure you already know that if you want to consider not only the dedicated cyclist, but also maybe the potential user group among the citizens of Helsinki. In some places where I've cycled, I have a hard time seeing two cargo bicycles overtaking each other on a multi-directional bicycle lane, or children or elderly feeling safe cycling. So there is a way to go. And then for data, the bicycle account here is super impressive, and it's been for a while, not only the latest one. And I'm just really taking a lot of inspiration back home. But I think you can also maybe be inspired by some things we do in Copenhagen with the interactive mapping and whatnot. So we welcome Helsinki in the club of cities aspiring to be among the world's best city of cyclists. You have a great potential, a great starting point. It will take hard priorities, and there will be opposition. It will take space allocation, and that hurts because you have to take that space from someone or something. It takes investments. Here you are already beyond Copenhagen, because lately we are investing around 15 million euros per year, and your level is more around 20 million a year. So that sounds really good. Consider not only investing in the hardware, but also the software, because if you want to implement this holistic approach, you need staff, not only in the bicycle team, but across your organization that also has the mandate to prioritize cycling. And then in terms of policy, with regulation being a public authority, give certain tools in the toolbox about regulating, for example, new developments, etc. We've been discussing the Dutch words for cycling, stressing the importance of everyday cycling as opposed to sports cycling. So why did I bring this photo of Tour de France? It's not only because Copenhagen will be hosting Tour de France next year, but what we should remember when striving to be up on the podium with the best cycling cities is that no one is the winner alone. So all the best athletes in the Tour de France, they have a car behind them with energy drinks, and they have trainers, and they have staff, and they have co-cyclists who do all the hard work before they can do the fancy sprint. And then they have all the fans cheering them, going, yeah, you can do this. And I hope through Handshake that we can be each other's support. But I will also suggest Helsinki to really keep on building the group around you that can help you succeed. Because you cannot do this alone. You have all the right approaches, all the best staff, all the ambitious politicians. But if you really want to make a difference, you have to find even more people who can help you achieve your goals. Good luck.
Thank you very, very much. Super inspiring. And can we actually take the slide of like what Helsinki should do? Because I think it was quite clear steps. Dear audience, do we have questions or comments? Please.
I'm Oskari Kaupinmäki, the cycling coordinator at the City of Helsinki. Thank you very much, Marie, for once again a great presentation. And it's a real pleasure having you here, telling to us about what you're doing in Copenhagen. There's definitely a lot of inspiration there, both in the software world and in the hardware world. And at first, I'd like to maybe reflect on what you told us we should do. totally noted. We shall. And yes, we're really aware of the deficiencies we have in our infrastructure, and that's why our focus group is truly the potential users, the people who do not even identify themselves as cyclists. We really love that comparison to vacuum cleaning that you've done in Copenhagen, or someone in Copenhagen has done. I do have a specific question. This might be a bit of a pickle, but I'm going to throw it out there. We have the entire idea of the design guideline for bicycle traffic we have here in Helsinki is to spread expertise of bicycle planning throughout the organization, so not just among us bicycle planners, the bicycle experts. A challenge that we often face is that when we're pushing forward the holistic approach, once we go from a strategy level to a detail level, the street planners will often, or sometimes, look at the street as a whole, and when they notice that there's challenges with space allocation, they have a tendency to cut space not from cars, not from pedestrians, but from bicycle infrastructure. So the mode that already requires the least bit of space is cut down even more, and the justification that we hear is that they're looking at the bigger picture while us are supposedly only looking at the bicycles. So what would be your rebuttal to a comment like this, and do you ever face challenges like this in Copenhagen?
So I will say that most bicycle projects in Copenhagen do not go quietly, but it might be a little bit technical, but the way we finance our cycling projects is mostly through direct political investments. So at the annual budget negotiations, the politicians will set aside, say, 15 million euros for cycling projects. Then we prepare them a list with the projects that we recommend, and they might also have some projects themselves that they want to invest in. And then we have a list of directly invested cycling projects. So when those projects then hit the construction department, there is like the overarching goal is to promote cycling. That's sort of the message with that investment. So we have these dedicated cycling infrastructure improvement projects where you have to have really good arguments if you don't follow up on the vision behind those projects. And then parallel to that, when we do street renovations, when we do other construction projects, of course we try also to upgrade the bicycle infrastructure. It's not always possible. Sometimes the politically dedicated cycling projects meet resistance locally, and we also have to adjust the project. So this happens all the time as well. But there might be a difference in the way that we get a direct decision from our political committee. What should the goal of this project be, of this investment? I don't know. And then changing the culture in an organization is not done overnight either. It has taken also some years in the city of Copenhagen from when we started out with this ambition to be the world's best cycling city. We have had a lot of internal processes and workshops and meetings and management involvement, etc., etc., etc. So it takes hard work. I think you're on really good track, but of course it can be. You can feel impatient sometimes when everyone does not have completely the same mindset. I would say though, in the long run, it's a good thing that your colleagues are trying to think holistically, maybe not always in terms of the policies that you're promoting, but I think in the long term it's better for the city.
So the big picture should be including all these topics, and that's definitely a cultural change. Please, let's go here first.
Thank you. Thank you. Peter Litjens from the Netherlands. Thank you, Marie, for your presentation. And I think you managed in Copenhagen in the last, decade or more to inspire a lot of cities with the knowledge you built up and the examples you gave. Not only via the Handshake project, but through a good policy making, a good execution. That's also very, very difficult.
Yep.
And you also have a good communication and good marketing department, and that's very important. Show what you do. Do you also share your knowledge within Denmark with other municipalities? That's
Yes.
one of the questions, because you told us that you also develop your own guidelines. Do you share them with other municipalities? Because Denmark is bigger than Copenhagen. And the other question regards the space allocation. You mentioned the project where you got rid of the cars in a shopping street, I guess. And you told us that the entrepreneurs, the shop owners, were quite skeptical about the project. A lot of complaints, probably fear of missing out on income. Did you also do a survey afterwards, after the implementation? And what was the satisfaction of the shop owners afterwards?
Right. So to answer the first question, do we also share experiences and knowledge, and do we collaborate in Denmark among the municipalities? We have a formal network of municipalities called the Municipal Cycling Network. And one of the things we coordinate there is if there are adjustments to the road regulations from a national level, then we can organize ourselves and respond to that, not only as a single municipality, but as a whole, because often this is where the expertise is out in the municipalities. So we have a formalized collaborative network, and one of my team is on the board, so we are really active there. Then we have the Cycling Embassy of Denmark, where I'm the vice chair. We have municipalities, but also consulting firms, NGOs like the Cyclist Federation, national authorities as well. So this is more like a cross-sectorial setting, but I think that's also really crucial, because oftentimes the consultancy firms are designing the projects that we want to construct. We are not doing all the work. We are also giving out that job to private companies. And if they don't have the understanding, the mentality, and the expertise to do that well, it will make it so much more complicated. So this is also really important. And then we have a national cycling conference where we also meet all the different actors across. So yeah, but we are, of course, dependent on the national regulations and guidelines, and we also need the police to accept all our projects. And this is an example of also things take time. So we had the political decision to do some traffic calming in a local neighborhood with a lot of schools. The police said no. It doesn't follow the national regulation. We were like, but we can see that it's better for traffic safety. Shouldn't the police promote traffic safety? But they said no. And then we complained to the road directorate. And 2 years after, with the new Minister of Transport, they have said that the police was wrong and they have to redefine their decision making. But my colleagues in the traffic safety and construction department, they know how the police will react to projects like that. So we also have an internal skepticism about ambitious projects, because they know that the police would be skeptical. And this is slowly changing now also from the national level. So the point about being patient and perseverant is not about slowing down or being less ambitious. It's just not. Meeting resistance is not a failure. It's just a premise, basically. And you should just go on doing what you're already doing. The next question about the high street. There were some really vocal shop owners. I'm not saying that the majority of shop owners were necessarily against it. Of course, it's always bothersome to have a construction project going on in your street. But one of the companies that was in the local media all the time was a fridge company. And of course, for them, reducing access for cars, that was crucial to their business. But I mean, we cannot maintain a certain street layout to protect one singular business with a certain need. We need to think about what is the need for the city overall. And today it's a really, really attractive street to have a shop in. It was quite difficult to isolate the effects of the project because of the financial crisis. So we tried to compare with other high streets, but there are local issues as well. So we don't have the very clear evidence of the effect, but we can see now we don't see closed shops in this high street. It's really thriving. So, and we've tried to do other analysis as well about shops and cycling, which show that it does not have a negative effect to close for car traffic.
So it's like deep ecosystem trust building work to many directions, to shopkeepers and policies and all of that. Last question, please.
if I could continue with the municipality question first, and then Klaus Ottaveli-Kosta, and I would like to ask about the neighboring municipality or the enclave municipality
Yes.
that you have,
Yeah.
the Frederiksberg there. How you work with them? Because
So Copenhagen is really peculiar because we are one municipality, and in the middle of Copenhagen we have a small separate municipality with their own political council, etc. And they are often right-wing, whereas we are social democrat majority. And they are completely surrounded by Copenhagen's municipality. They have the ambition to be Denmark's best municipality for cycling. So it's a right-wing municipality, but with a really strong cycling agenda. And if you look at modal share, they're actually a little bit higher than we are in Copenhagen. And we have, permanent collaboration with both on the planning, on the management, and also politically. And one of the projects we are collaborating with them on right now is a highway crossing the city center that was never really constructed in the 60s and the 70s. It was planned to cross the exact center of Copenhagen, and they planned to tear down a lot of buildings, but we didn't have the finances to complete it. So we have parts of it in place now, crossing both municipalities, and both municipalities want to do something about that, really old-fashioned piece of infrastructure. But we need to collaborate with the state. So that's an example of how we can collaborate, also trying to push an agenda on the national level.
Thank you very much, and good question for Helsinki as well, as the whole metropolitan area is part of the system. Please.
Klaus Bonner, CEO of the Danish Cyclists Federation. First of all, to follow up on Peter's remarks, we are in the Cyclists Federation, the secretariat of both the municipal council and also the cycling embassy.
Yeah.
And the point of that is that we kind of see ourselves as the eyes and ears everywhere. Also, being an NGO, we can move more freely between civil servants in municipalities, government officials, politicians, NGOs, commercial stakeholders. So I think that is, one side of our job is, of course, advocacy, but another part of, I think, a modern cyclist federation should be also to be kind of a smooth operator, if you can put it that way, because basically a lot of doors are open to us if we put ourselves in a position where we get the information. And of course, that can be extremely useful, getting that information and pairing that information. And to Marie, I would just thank you for a very fantastic presentation. Being your old mayor 10 years ago, I'm extremely proud how far you've taken it. Yeah, no, but I am. It actually touches me a lot. I would have loved that social media had existed at those days. And I think this is basically should be for everybody the best takeaway from your presentation is how an online survey with the users can be used. And I know that, as far as I know, you had over 10,000 responses. And it's not a citizen meeting with angry people and where you kind of get into an offensive role. I think a lot of municipalities all over Europe should explore how can we use social media much more to gather that kind of information. And of course, that's a wonderful thing about students in your office, but maybe we should actually also start to relocate resources in that, because this is, I believe, taking citizens' engagement and citizens' co-creation to a completely new level, that we kind of take democracy away from the only active ones, which can be, I remember from the Nørrebrogade case, can be tough politically, to actually make it much more inclusive. So really congratulations with that. And I think in the Handshake project, I think you could also kind of develop, how can we use this much more? How can we develop this? How can we be much more innovative? Because the citizen wants it. That's obvious. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think this is worth of once more giving applause to Mary. Thank you very much. And then